see what we have here. Chevy car, a great sign. 3 men all getting out. They're all coming in. It's okay. One smiling. That's a really good sign. Jacks don't usually smile. And they're not ordering from Nina, so that's even better. Oh, thank goodness. None of them are wearing the right boots. I think they're just workers. We're okay. Well, I'm thinking of it. You do use code names here. My name's not really Zed, and Gamma's not his name either. For now, I'm calling you 10. You're going to be our 10th collector since our cell started. There's other cells, other collectors, but communications are difficult, and we'd always do our own collection work. It's dangerous, but it's a vital position, and you do need to stay on your toes. We won't send you into the field without lookouts and contacts, but it still gets a little dicey sometimes. So keep working. Nina's shift is almost up. We need to get her that USB back. We can't burn her. Not yet.
It comes at an odd time. The Americans did not want to be independent at the Battle of Lexington and Concord. It took them a year to make that decision. They just wanted the British to leave them back in salutary neglect. Why in 1776? Why a year after the fighting began did they finally declare independence? Well, think of the Americans in thirds. There's a third that are patriots. They're rebels. They're going to fight one way or the other. The other third is loyalists. They don't want to leave Britain for any reason. And the other third is the uncommitted. It was really a letter that was written to explain why they were leaving England, and it was designed to convince loyalists and the uncommitted to try to join up with the patriots. The vast majority, about 3/4 of the document, is a list of problems and things that the king has done to the Americans, justifying why they should leave. Now, a lot of the document, the first third, the preamble part, is borrowed from an enlightened philosopher named John Locke. The majority of it comes from Locke's idea of the social contract theory, also known as the consent of the governed. That means that governments are created to protect the natural rights of the people. The people give up some of their rights, so the government will protect the rest of the rights. And therefore, the government has to protect them. And if the government stops protecting the people's rights, the people have the right to overthrow the government and create a new one. Now, the preamble is very important, and we use it a lot today in modern history. And that is the statement of equality, that everyone has inalienable rights. But note the hypocrisy of Thomas Jefferson saying that everyone has inalienable natural rights that can't be taken away. He's a man that owned slaves and was not shy about using them. So what are the impacts of the preamble? Well, the equality message was attempted to put into practice. After the Revolution, northern states emancipated slavery, both by law and in constitutions. And there was a rallying cry by abolitionists almost immediately after the American Revolution to abolish slavery. And that's going to lead into those American Civil War leaders, abolitionist leaders. The majority of the Declaration of Independence is an effort to show King George as a tyrant. Now, why they avoided talking about Parliament? That's because the Americans felt that a representative legislative body was the way that a government should run. So they couldn't criticize Parliament because those were representatives of the English people. They just didn't feel that they were their own representatives. So they wanted to break the bonds with King George by calling him a tyrant, trying to get those uncommitted people onto the Patriots' side. So they cited examples of the king violating the rights of Englishmen, moving trials, think of the Intolerable Acts, having standing armies in the colonies, quartering troops in American homes, levying taxes without representation, try to prove that he's not protecting natural rights so that he could be removed and a new government could be created.
You're making pretty good time here. You holding up all right? Look, APOC manipulates the public with a bad history. We take information you collectors find, dig into the archives and find primary sources in order to make new public history projects. The collections work provides that context we need in order to understand other materials that we do find. APOC just takes the useful bits from the archives and they tweak it a bit to tell whatever story they need. It's why they don't just destroy it, actually. Man, I hate bugs. I gotta use the bathroom. I'll be right back. Everything looks okay for a minute, so just keep working and I'll be back in a second.
Figure out the impacts of the declarations. On the Americans themselves, it allowed America to go out and be treated like another independent country, which means they could finally seek out an alliance with another country. And their first alliance comes with the French after the Battle of Saratoga. The French were nervous that the Americans were just going to be sort of hit and run guerrilla warriors, and the Battle of Saratoga showed the French that they could win a stand-up battle with the British. So the French signed on, partially because they just wanted to annoy the British, partially because they thought that they might be able to get some territory out of the British as well. So the French sent their navy after a little while, and they also sent an officer to help drill the troops. His name is Lafayette. The Navy is going to prove to be invaluable at the Battle of Yorktown, trapping the British on the Yorktown Peninsula while the American army surrounds the peninsula, forcing a surrender. On the rest of the world, the Declaration showed that a Republican with a small r, not the political party, but the idea that a government by and of the people could be successful. And this informed or showed the French how to have their French Revolution, and their Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen was largely modeled on our Declaration of Independence. And even as the French Revolution became bloody, Thomas Jefferson, the writer of the Declaration of Independence, continued to support it, even though it cost him political points. Latin America is later, when it starts to throw off its colonial chains, will start to use the Declaration of Independence as its model as well. So largely the Declaration of Independence becomes this model for justification of overthrowing corrupt governments or other occupying powers. Here's the timeline you can look at. For after the Declaration, Jefferson and Franklin go to France in 1777. Lafayette joins America. 77, the Battle of Saratoga convinces the French alliance. In 78, the French declare war on Britain. And then it's all the way until 1781 that the Washington has to fight at the Battle of Yorktown. And there are significant battles, but we only have to know 3 at this point. So Washington, for his part, was just trying to keep the army alive long enough to make the British frustrated that they didn't want to spend any more blood or treasure fighting the Americans, and it's to figure out how the war ended. And it's important to understand Washington's strategy. His strategy was to prolong the war. This is a fairly common tactic for an undersized military fighting a much superior opponent. And it's the idea that a smaller force can defeat a stronger force just through sheer willpower. Eventually, the British are going to get tired of losing men and money. This war takes about 6 years. And the British didn't really want to be there. They didn't want to be fighting Americans who they saw as British themselves. They didn't want to be using British money to kill Americans who they thought were British. They didn't want to lose their soldiers in the Americas. Washington, for his part, wanted to use conventional military. They could use quick hits and surgical strikes, but he was not trying to hide behind bushes, rocks, and trees. He would use those styles occasionally with people like Francis Marion, but that was not his ideal situation. He wanted things like the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. The Americans did win a conventional battle, and this led to that formal French alliance, which led to the war becoming global, which meant that the British were going to have to spend even more money and even more men trying to defeat the Americans and now the French. And for about 4 years, they traded blows. General Cornwallis of the British made a mistake in 1781. He went to the Yorktown Peninsula assuming that the British Navy would be able to take his military off of the peninsula at Yorktown. The French got there first, surrounded the peninsula with the French Navy, and the American army captured the British military on the peninsula. The British military was forced to surrender. Now, this does not end the revolution. The revolution didn't end for a few more months. And even the king didn't want to end the revolution with that. He wanted to keep sending more troops. The British Parliament and the British people forced the end of the war, arguing that the Americans should have independence, and eventually they would probably fail and ask to come back to the British. Okay, so George wanted to keep fighting. The people did not. This led to the Treaty of Paris, which ended the revolution. The Americans were declared independent, but the problem for the Americans was that once they were no longer part of that mercantile system where the Americans had a guaranteed British trade partner, they had to go out and find their own. And the British wouldn't protect them with their navy. So the economy collapsed. They were at the mercy of pirates. This leads to a lot of problems, which means now the Americans had to build a new country. And their first effort was something called the Articles of Confederation.
That's better. Hey, speaking of public history, do you remember that Andrew Jackson documentary that started streaming on everyone's iPhones last year? Yeah, that was me. It only showed one time. The last 15 minutes or so were cut off. APOC had been debating on whether or not to bring back Jackson out of the 20. we did something. And then there was that unexplained explosion at the mall the next day. That was not one of our jobs. Nope. APOC was trying to get the news cycle back and make people think that we were histo-terrorists. It's a pretty common tactic. Wait a minute. No, that car I know. Keep your head down. Work faster. We're going to have company. Just act natural. I hope we didn't find out that Neely's brother lost that USB. Could just be a coincidence.
Remember that the Articles of Confederation were created during the American Revolution while we were fighting the British. The Second Continental Congress, which wrote the Olive Branch Petition and other documents to the King, transformed into this Articles of Confederation Congress during the war. They were fighting together. They had a unified cause. The problem is, as soon as the American Revolution was over, the colonies, which are now going to be referred to as states, they couldn't work together as well. After the revolution, each state is going to try to act on its own individually. Here's what the Articles of Confederation wanted. They were fighting against a tyrannical king, so they wanted a strong state legislature system. Their main argument was that they were being taxed without representation, so they wanted to have a system where people would be represented. They saw kings as potential tyrants, not just kings, but any executive, so what we'd call today a president. So they didn't include one. We had only a state legislature. And they didn't have a judicial branch for the same purpose. They were afraid of tyranny. They gave the power to the states. So it's the colonial assemblies who were truly representative, so the colonies turned into states, so the state government should have all the power. And they incredibly limited the central government.
All right, look, real quick before they get in here. Fast food joints have gotten special breaks after the takeover. Their food is able to be cheaper than other places. This is why there's often a lot of people in here. The Jacks sometimes hang out in here and stings. I thought we were clean. Might still be. Maybe the mayor's just hungry or making an appearance or something. It could just be a coincidence, but stay calm, stay on your toes, and be quick.
There were a couple of limited successes. Right after the ratification, there was a dispute over land holdings. When the American Revolution was finished and the Americans had won, the American government, the now United States, received all this land all the way over to the Mississippi from the British. But many of the colonies had claims to that land. They could use that land to sell to make a profit, or they could charge rents. And states like New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia had huge land claims, and small states that were blocked in, like New Jersey and Delaware, had none. So those small states were worried about being overwhelmed. The large states, they didn't want to give up the land. Finally, when they did agree to give up the land to the central government, the Articles government had to promise they'd use it only for common purposes, like paying off the American Revolution debt, and they had to make new states out of it, which would come in as equals. They didn't want to have a system of colonies because they saw how that worked out for the British. And the Northwest and the land ordinances are really the only true successes of the Articles. There was a Northwest Ordinance that was put in place. It was what we'd call today the Old Northwest, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. The new states were designed to enter as equals. The Northwest Ordinance forbid new slaves.
All right, this is not a good sign. Walked right up to Nina, and he has 2 aides with him. I bet there's more in the car, too. Oh, no. She's starting to sweat. Stop looking over here. 10, don't look. Get busy.
So without the British enemy, the Confederation fell apart because it was only a loose collection of friends. In fact, each individual state saw itself as sovereign, which means that there was essentially 13 independent countries working together under one larger umbrella, and it didn't work very well. They were able to sign the Treaty of Paris, but they were too focused on their colonial assemblies to sort of work together. And then the question after about 9 years became whether to fix or not to fix. Some founding fathers were arguing that the Articles needed to be fixed within a couple of years. Some were trying to stick it out because of their unrealistic ideological demands. They had fought for the no tyranny of a king. They were going to stay with that idea. One of the reasons that the Articles suffered so much was because they had lost all their trade with the British. Once the colonies were no longer part of the British Empire and they were their own country, mercantilism kicked in. Only trade with your colonies so that you don't lose any gold. This triggered an economic depression in the United States, and for about 9 years it was very difficult for the common man to pay their bills, which led to anger. One notable example was Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts. This farmer, who was a former Revolutionary veteran named Daniel Shays, took up arms against the government of Massachusetts because the farmers were having their land taken away either because of mortgage debt or because of not being able to pay their taxes. Many other elites began to look for excuses to strengthen the national government anyways. They took Shays' Rebellion and used it as an example of what happens when you don't have a powerful, strong central government, which led to further calls for reform. Shays' Rebellion was not the cause of this. It is one of the catalysts that lead to a call for a new central government. This was already in the works. This just led to it happening faster. There are several issues with the inability of the Articles of Confederation to regulate the economy. First thing to note is that the central government, had no ability to collect taxes. They could not force states to give them money, which meant that there was no revenue stream for the Articles of Confederation Congress. So any laws that they passed, they couldn't back up with the force of money. They had no power of the purse. The reason for this was because of colonial ideology, the idea that you shouldn't be able to tax somebody without representation, just like the colonial assemblies were upset because Parliament tried to tax them. The states would have been upset if the central government tried to tax them. Now, the central government did have responsibilities, but they had no money to carry those responsibilities out. They could not collect taxes to, say, pay for a military. And early Americans didn't trust the military anyway, so they had no military. They could not force other countries to respect them. They had no regulation powers. They couldn't control things like inflation. They couldn't control things like money supply.
It is Mayor Cromwell, and he's walking around doing that mayor shaking hands thing. If he comes over here, you're watching YouTube videos and updating your blog. It's called Shufflehead Rules. Yeah, I know Shufflehead music. It stinks, but it's the most popular band right now. Who do you think approved of it? Yeah, keep your head down. Your screen's blocked from view. Put in your earbuds. Just keep working.
So many of the early founders wanted to fix these things. It was in the works for a few months. The membership was very distinct at the Philadelphia Convention. Besides the obvious that they were all white, rich men, it was attended by people that wanted massive change, that wanted to change the government. But it's also important to note that it's not a unified movement. So when you hear people talking about the founding fathers and what they wanted, remember that not everybody at the convention wanted the same thing, and also remember that not everybody in the country attended the convention. It was only people that wanted the change. It's going to be very controversial. Some of the proposed economic fixes. One, they wanted a national or a central government that had the power to tax. This would allow them to maintain an army, and it would allow them to ensure what's referred to as domestic tranquility, which means national security, social welfare programs, and the ability to put down any sort of internal uprising. The national government could also regulate interstate trade, which means that when states were arguing about things, the national government could fix it. Whether it was having a central unified coining of money system, if it was a tariff between states, the government could step in and regulate that stuff. More fixes for the economy. The central government could have a judge system, which would judge interstate disputes. They were designed to ensure a better economy, so the people at the convention really liked them. But the problem was that it violated some of the central goals of the revolution. It was about getting rid of these central government constraints. The proposals were placing more limitations on the legislative branch, and it's not fully accepted, especially during the ratification debate. A few more fixes. The central government could have the power to coin money. States could not coin their own money. First is the foreign relations issues. The Articles of Confederation allowed the central government to sign treaties and have foreign policy relations. However, the United States was very weak. They had no respect in the international community. The British were still in American territory, and they couldn't force the Spanish to let them use the port of New Orleans. Partially this is because there's no military. And while the national government did have treaty power, they had no strength to back it up. Diplomatic policies, diplomatic weaknesses hurt the economy as well. Without having the port of New Orleans to access the Gulf of Mexico, they had very little in the way of westward expansion in the economy. You can see that the St. Louis, the Natchez, the Detroit, Fort Michelin, those were all technically American territories, and they had foreign powers in forts there.
I'm not good with this. She keeps looking from our direction. The mayor's starting to check out to see what she's looking at. Alright. Do you want another coffee? I'm going to go up and introduce myself. This might get a little interesting.
Now, some of the proposed constitutional fixes. One, let the national government tax. Give them taxing power that lead to a better military, or at least the ability to create a better military. The national or central government also should have the exclusive right to create treaties. The national goals would be promoted instead of regional goals. This led to many Southern fears, mainly over the slave system. There was a 20-year ban put into the Constitution on international slave trade elimination. A lot of this is based on the colonial assembly ideology. Remember, of the American Revolution, the states didn't trust and were jealous of a powerful central government. The central government, therefore, wasn't able to solve problems because all the power was given to the states, and they had a very weak central legislative body. The proposal is based, in the Constitution, is based on an idea of federalism. This is where you split the power among the federal, state, and local governments. So each power has shared powers, which are called concurrent powers. Some levels have powers that are all their own. For example, the national government has the ability to declare war, but the state governments don't. The Constitution provides something called the Supremacy Clause, which means that if a federal law exists, the state and the local have to follow that law, but it does try to protect the state and local governments by having what's referred to as enumerated or listed powers for the national government. Now, the ability to fix the Constitution was also a fix. Under the Articles of Confederation, you had to have a unanimous state vote in order to amend the Articles, which was almost impossible to do. In fact, at the Philadelphia Convention, which started off as a way to fix the economic issues, Rhode Island didn't even show up. So they only had 12 out of the 13 states, which means that technically the Constitution was itself a revolution. Other constitutional additions that were there to help out the government, no executive in the Articles because they feared tyranny, so the Constitution added a president. This would provide leadership. It also provided a check on legislative inaction. There were also checks and balances that were added. This is because they were afraid of tyranny of a single branch, like a legislative branch. So each branch has a set of powers, and no one branch is supposed to be stronger than the other. The Articles had no judicial branch, so they established a Supreme Court and a series of federal judges, federal courts that would provide that ability to resolve disputes about the Constitution between states and about other issues.
Now here's your coffee. Cream and 2 sugars, right? That's what I take. I guess my mind was on other things. Look, Cromwell is suspecting something. I can't have me implicated. It's just too valuable an asset. Put your transmitter earpiece in case something goes down. Don't worry, it looks just like your earbuds. Well, we have some time to kill, so maybe bad choice of words. Keep getting that information.
Under the Articles of Confederation, each state had only one vote, regardless of how many people it sent to the Confederation Congress. This tended to boil down into regionalism between the New England, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Southern colonies, and eventually into just North and South, which means that they could never get 9 out of the 13 state majority that was necessary to pass hardly anything. Representation in the legislature was one of the key issues of the Philadelphia Convention. The large states, the large population states, came with a plan in mind, led by James Madison, the father of the Constitution. And this was called the Virginia Plan, which would have created a 2-house legislature with both houses based on the state's population size. The small states like New Jersey and Delaware and such didn't like this plan because they saw that as a lack of representation, that they would always be outvoted in all of the issues. So they proposed what's referred to as the New Jersey Plan. This was to make the small states happy, and there would be a 1-house legislature with 1 vote per state, regardless of the size of the state. So how did they fix this? They decided to push those 2 plans together in what's referred to as the Great, or also the Connecticut Compromise. And that was to just push the 2 plans together, have 2 houses. The upper house would be called the Senate, and it would have an equal number of votes, 2 in this case, regardless of the size, and that's the New Jersey Plan. And the lower house, called the House of Representatives, would be based on population size, and more population meant more representatives in the House of Representatives. Because the issue wasn't between the large and the small states. The bigger issue was northern states versus southern states. Because if you're going to base one House of Congress on population size, well, then the issue is really who has more population, and the North has much more population that's able to vote, meaning white population. The South was afraid that they were going to lose the population race because a chunk of it was based in slaves. The North had already begun gradual emancipation efforts, so their slavery was largely dwindling away. The South wanted to have those slaves count towards the population because that would boost their number of representatives. It would also boost their votes in the Electoral College for the president. So what the compromise was, because the North was afraid that this union would fall apart, and the leaders of the Constitutional Convention were afraid that if they didn't come up with some sort of a compromise, then all the revolutionary stuff that they had fought for and were fighting for the last 20 years would go away. The North gave in to the Southern demands. They came up with a 3/5 compromise in which 3/5 of the slave population would count towards population, and also a tax that was never passed. And this increased the Southern power to elect presidents. In fact, the first 3 presidents came from the South. The South also demanded that a Fugitive Slave Act be written into the Constitution. Although the word slave is never used in the Constitution, it was clearly a Fugitive Slave Act. And the international slave trade could not be banned for 20 years. So slavery was a much bigger issue than the big states versus small states.
Here goes nothing. I'll be right back. Hey, Mayor Cromwell. Nice to meet you. What would you do with this? You got a great idea. Awesome. Let's talk. Let me just grab my coat. I'll see you then at 10. I got a diversion set up. It's just going to take a little time. Keep working.
What is the constitutional theory at the convention? Well, it's based on Locke's consent to the governed theory. This means that the people give power to the government to protect their rights, and once the rights are being denied, then the people can form a new government. That's why it says we the people at the beginning of the Constitution and not we the states, because individual rights and freedoms are protected, not just the rights of the states. It's also based on rights of Englishmen. Think about all of those rights of Englishmen we saw before. And the rights of Englishmen, they couldn't be taxed without representation. So this is why tax laws are all based in the House of Representation. Free speech, jury trials, these are all English rights that we latched onto and put into our Constitution. The constitutional founders were pragmatists. They understood they needed to get this done. The founders were all wealthy white men. Some people refer to this as a natural aristocracy. So while they had wonderful glowing things to say about democracy and representation, they didn't really trust the people. So they wanted a government that would work, not just one that was based on ideology. They distrusted the mob, which means they distrusted the people that they were so glowingly talking about. So they put buffers in place to stop what they refer to as tyranny of the majority. This is why you don't have just majority elections for everything, that we have rights written in to protect the individuals. So they have an electoral college, they have appointed senators, they have appointed Supreme Court justices who are appointed for life. In fact, only one out of the 4 major branches of government, the federal government, is actually voted on by the people according to the Constitution. All this bleeds into the ratification debate, whether or not to allow this Constitution to go into effect. How did the people approve it? 9 out of the 13 states had to approve it at a special state convention. This avoided that issue of unanimity, because not even all the states showed up to the convention. Now, technically, they overthrew the Articles of Confederation, but this is not a work of a single vision. This is not some sort of a divine document handed down by God. This was a document that was compromised on. Some people wanted a new monarchy. Some people wanted no president at all. Some people refused, like Thomas Paine, to even show up to the Constitutional Convention because they were afraid that it was going to overthrow the Articles of Confederation government. So the ratification debate itself was even more divided. What ends up happening is you have 2 groups, one called the Federalists, which wanted the government, the new constitutional government, which was based on federalism, and then you had the Anti-Federalists that didn't want the Constitution. The Federalists wanted a strong national government, they supported the Constitution, they tended to be the coastal wealthy elites that wanted a stronger control over the economy. People like Madison, Jefferson, Washington, Hamilton, Franklin, they're all Federalists. The Anti-Federalists wanted to keep all the power at the state level, wanting to believe that the state governments would be more responsive to people's needs. They feared a concentration of power in the hands of the elites. And the big thing that comes out of the Anti-Federalists is an inclusion of a Bill of Rights. Now, The Founding Fathers had to sell the people on this. The Constitution almost wasn't passed. So they wrote the Federalist Papers, but please remember, the Federalist Papers are propaganda. They are designed to argue for the Constitution and convince other people that they're wrong. They are written by Madison, Hamilton, and John Jay. They wanted a strong central government. They were trying to argue that they would have a strong central government to protect people's rights, but the Constitution would be weak enough to avoid a tyranny. It does allow some window into the founders' intentions, but it's not by any means a perfect document to understand what they wanted, because somebody like Hamilton actually wanted a monarchy, where somebody like Madison wanted more power at the state governments. So it's not a perfect document to understand the Founding Fathers. So the debate raged on. It took a couple of years to actually get this thing passed. It almost didn't pass, and the Anti-Federalists were worried about states' rights. So the Federalists, in order to get the Constitution signed off on, included the Bill of Rights, which the Anti-Federalists were begging for. The Federalists caved in. These are the first 10 amendments. You guys already know most. We're going to talk about the principles of the constitutional government. According to the Constitution, you want to have a government that is strong enough to protect your rights, and yet weak enough to not take them away. And it's a delicate balancing act. And our government the constitutional government started based on Locke's theories of consent of the governed and the ability to protect individual rights. Now, according to the consent of the governed theory, under the Constitution, power comes from the people. Under the Articles of Confederation, sovereignty came from the states. This causes a lot of confusion we'll talk about later in the Civil War era. Essentially, what consent of the governed means is that authority comes from the voters. The people allow the government to exist. Now, the limits to the power are important, even the people's power. The Founding Fathers were scared of what they referred to as a mobocracy. Today we'd say tyranny of the majority. The founders made up what was referred to as a natural aristocracy, rich white men, and they were afraid that the lower class would not handle their power well, that they were prone to fits of outrage, and they were emotional, and they weren't logical. So they limited republicanism with a small r. That means elector democracy, not political parties. Only about a quarter of the federal bodies were elected, and that's the House of Representatives. The Electoral College for the President, the Senate was appointed by the states, and the Supreme Court was appointed by the President. They also wanted to prevent tyranny of the central government. They wanted the central government to be powerful, but not too powerful. So they created federalism, in which the federal government had some delegated powers. We call them enumerated, which is the power to make war, the power to sign treaties, the power to coin money. They reserved some powers to the states, like licensing boards and education ideas. And some were held jointly. We call those concurrent powers. Both state, federal, and local governments can do all these things, like pass laws, make taxes, build roads. And then they also put in their individual powers, the idea that I have individual right to free speech, the individual right to free religion, and it's a balancing act. It's a weighting act. Because they feared tyranny, they also feared that one branch would end up having too much power. Each branch has the ability to check the power of the others. They also feared that the individual's rights would be taken away, especially if there was too much power at any level. So they included a Bill of Rights, and you know most of the Bill of Rights, so I'm not going to spend time condescending to you to tell you them. But this is the first 8 amendments. 9 and 10 are a little bit different, but really the ones we're concerned about for this class are 1 through 10.
Man, that guy likes to talk. This isn't good. He gave me a campaign button. Vote Cromwell. It's common sense. The button's really a marker. You stay here and finish up, and I'll draw Cromwell and whoever is with him with me. They might leave someone behind, but you're going to be safe here. They don't like to make a public scene, so I'll get word to the bunker. There's going to be a diversion in a few minutes. Get that USB done. Keep your earpiece in, and I'll see you in a little while.
Coming up next on the History Underground.
The mayor is following me. You're okay while you're in that booth. I'm going to be out of touch for a bit.
You know better than this. Camp, don't stop